Nigeria, a nation rich in human capital and natural resources, faces a significant challenge in bridging the digital divide that separates it from the technological advancements of the developed world. Now, this technology gap hinders economic growth, limits access to information and innovation, and perpetuates social inequalities. Meanwhile, Kenya finds itself at a crossroad where technological advancements and national security concerns collide. The government's increasing reliance on surveillance tools raises questions about the delicate balance between safeguarding citizens' privacy rights and ensuring public safety. This is The Conversation. I'm Dashen, Usman. Let's talk. Now, as the digital revolution continues to shape the global economy, Nigeria faces significant challenges in bridging the technology gap, by the way, between itself and more developed countries. With an increasing demand for technological innovation and digital infrastructure, experts are calling for strategic investments, policy reforms, and collaborations to accelerate Nigeria's digital transformation. Now, Nigeria's technology infrastructure is not good enough to support its growth. The country needs a lot of money to improve its technology infrastructure. While private companies are helping to improve Nigeria's technology infrastructure, government also needs to support these efforts to help Nigeria grow in the digital age. Now, joining me to speak more on this, we have a guest in the studio, Otis Umude, CEO iFem International and creator of Godspeed Hub. I hope I got that right.
Godspeed Hub.
Godspeed Hub.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us, Otis.
Thank you.
All right, now let's begin with, Nigeria's ICT infrastructure, which is in deficit right now. What are your thoughts on it, first of all?
So I think one of the areas there's a lot of growth that is happening in a few areas, in fintech, in agriculture, and also in the healthcare sector. But infrastructure is not there, and it needs to be more of a collaborative effort with private and government sector. So there's room for improvement, there's room for growth, but more hands need to come on the table to make that happen.
All right, so can you, describe or elaborate on how these infrastructure gaps affect, Nigerians?
Yeah, so one of the areas we have power supply. We don't have enough light. So that hinders people from really doing the job, that they want to do, search for information online, and you have to be online almost 24/7. And people don't have that unlimited internet access to power. So that's one way. The other way is internet access, the cost for data. Now you have a few companies like Starlink who are making it possible nationwide. But the cost is high. So there needs to be a way to subsidize that, to bring that down so people could be online more and be able to get more information and find out what niche works for them and be able to pursue their dreams.
Okay, now you did talk about, the government playing a key role. Can you, elaborate on, what role you think they should play, compared to the private sector? And are both sectors effectively collaborating to bridge the gap at this moment?
So not 100%, because you see the cost of internet is high. What needs to happen from a private sector is create the fiber optic line to reach more areas, and the government needs to come in and provide subsidy. By subsidizing the cost to build those infrastructure, it reduces the burden on the telecom companies. Thereby, that savings get passed down to individuals and businesses that will allow them to be online more frequently and be able to compete with the world.
Okay. Now, you talked about competing with the world. Yeah. Now, given that Nigeria's population is expected to expand, or surpass 460 million by 2050, that's quite, a lot of people in Nigeria. How important is it for government to prioritize ICT infrastructure, in its long-term economic planning?
So right now, most people should know that data is the new gold. What do I mean by that? The more information you have about people, demographic, infrastructure, you can predict and plan. So most companies now are switching to digital transformation, which simply means they're switching all their physical data filing to more automation, more online. This gives them quick analytics, quick insight. They can make informed decisions. So by having more information online, this helps a company make decisions. It helps the government. How do Nigerians meet up in the future? We have to start thinking of doing more training at an earlier stage, at a secondary school and primary school age. Start infusing technology into these kids.
The curriculum.
The curriculum, have a more structured way where ICT is embedded into the curriculum. That way they are able to have a passion, pick a career that aligns or infuse technology into it, so that way they're prepared for the future.
But it also needs to be practical and not just theoretical.
Yes, so
because that's what we get in Nigerian education system.
So I grew up in the country but left to the US. And right while I was in secondary school, one of the advantages I have was I was working with robotics right in secondary school. So more hands-on, more practical, things like that are what is going to help. So one of the ways it could be looked at is institutions looking for strategic partnership with organizations around the world or companies here that have a future of technology and see how can they bridge that gap. What system needs to be in place? What does the future of technology look like? And what type of training, hands-on training, are needed, not just online or lab or just reading books.
Okay. Now, let's talk about the National Broadband Plan, which, aims to achieve a minimum broadband penetration of 70% by 2025, which is just next year. Now, are we there yet?
We are not there yet.
So what percentage, where are we now?
So based on some data that we ran a couple of months ago, we're about 50%.
Oh, wow.
Now, it's not even about not just being there, it's also staying there. It's one thing to have an infrastructure, it's one other thing for it to work. So sometimes you'll be online, you have internet access, you're working, all of a sudden, no access.
Exactly.
Right? So there needs to be more stable infrastructure back in that data fiber that has been run throughout the country.
Okay, now I remember reading, that in 2018 they were at 30%,
Yes.
and now we're in 2024 and they're at 70%. So would you say that's progress, and will there be an increase by 2025?
So definitely there is an increase. We usually run a speed test throughout Nigeria, just seeing how data throughput and internet service is. From January to now, we've seen a significant increase. One of the bigger challenges we notice is if you're inside a building, you don't have a stronger signal as when you're outside. So there is increase. I know they could meet that, but I don't fully know how much the government play a role and how much subsidy is involved. But more of those is needed to fast track that. No country in the world have 100%. A good number to be is around 80 to 90%. Because you have dead zone area, you have bushes, mountains when nobody are there.
We have rural areas as well.
Rural areas also too. But so the goal is to get as close to 90% as fast as you can. And that's the first goal. Then the next goal is having more sustainable infrastructure, having a roadmap of how frequently to upgrade the technology to meet the bandwidth of more users going online at the same time.
But would you say that private organizations have actually played that particular role or are playing a huge role when it comes to that?
Yeah, so they've played that role for a very long time single-handedly. That's why the costs get passed down on to the subscribers. By having a government involving more, that will reduce the cost and that will actually even speed up the acceleration, the growth.
Okay. Now, the reason why I asked that was because, some time ago I read that Main One had actually made significant investments, in Nigeria and in West Africa, in the region, including, spending millions in submarine cables and also they have further plans to expand as well. So how pivotal is their contribution in addressing Nigeria's broadband challenges?
So they've actually done a great job in bringing fiber into the country. But one challenge I see with them, well, not necessarily them alone, but is they don't have a redundant network. I remember a few months ago or so, we were having a network issue because there was a fiber break or something.
I remember that.
Yeah, so again, that's why, more study needs to be done. So improvements are being made, but you have to think of how to sustain that. One of the ways of sustaining that is having a redundant network, a backup. So if one fails, you have something to fall back on. And obviously that costs much more money and much investment. Others have looked into getting the signal from satellite, like Starlink, Elon Musk actually have right now in Nigeria. But the cost of that is quite high.
Of course.
So Main One has done a great job. I've looked at the footprint. I think in the next few years, they should put us at a good place to compete with the world. So kudos to them.
So are we like the largest in West Africa, Nigeria?
We are.
We are.
In users,
Fantastic.
yes.
All right. Now, let's come back to Lagos here and we'll talk about, I remember as far back as 2018, it was said that Yaba Silicon Valley in Lagos, was described as a major catalyst for Nigeria's tech ecosystem. I don't know if that still stands now, but then how has the development of such hubs and even hubs such as yours, impacted the job market, especially for the youth?
So the good thing it has done is having a hub like that, it inspires others to know we have it. It is still the biggest in this region. Right. That's one thing, but what that does is it let us know that there is a future. And those who are inspiring are thinking of, okay, I want to get into this field, there is a roadmap to that. Take a company like Flutterwave and Paystack.
Paystack, yeah.
I think in 2020, Paystack was acquired by a British a company called Stripe for over 20 I think $200 million.
Okay.
And then Flutterwave was evaluated at, the last time I checked, at $3 billion. So there is a roadmap. There is some progress being made. A lot of companies outside of Nigeria are heavily interested in fintech, especially because it's still a virgin land and there is more room for exponential growth.
All right, you talked about, countries still interested, but what further steps can be taken to replicate, the success of such hubs, in other regions of the country, not just Lagos?
So that's when we need more research and development. You take a case study, you look at how Flutterwave started, what hurdles they face, how did they meet those barriers, and where they are now, and kind of see, does that model work for different sectors, and see how can that be tailored. And some of these take try and error, research, development, testing out to see what works. And this costs money, and this is where you need private and government funding to be infused in those areas, giving grants to just ideas alone. So you can spend 6 months, a year just testing out those ideas. So that's one of the things I think can be done is looking at a different model. And you can also look outside of Nigeria also too and see what have worked, what have failed. Look at how Google started, how Microsoft, companies like that, and see how can that be tailored to fit the business model in Nigeria. We always have power issue. Okay, can solar be used? Do I have light in this area? If I don't, what option do I have? Can I use wind? Can I use water? Can I use solar? So you have to look at your region and see what works and start building your piece to start doing your research to get where you want to go.
All right, now you did talk about, funding, when it comes to money. We know what happens, but it's very, very critical and it's very important when it comes to, moving the country forward. Now, there's considerably an annual infrastructure gap. What alternative financing mechanisms, can Nigeria explore, and that's beyond traditional government funding, to be able to meet its ICT development goals?
So a couple of months ago, I was privileged to travel to San Francisco in the U.S., California, Silicon Valley. And I got to find out that there are organizations that actually fund companies or startups around the world. One of them is YC, which is the the YC. So they fund opportunities. The money is quite hefty, but you have to have some kind of testing done, you know, something to show that you are able to get there, a business plan, projecting revenue, where you want to go, where you are.
To sell yourself. To
sell yourself, pretty much, right? So YC is just one of them. There's a bunch of more Silicon Valley. The only one drawback is they're mostly tech-driven in the IT space. Once in a while, you do find a few others who are in agriculture, healthcare, and other areas. But it's more technology-driven based companies that have to do with AI, robotics, and blockchain technologies.
Okay. Now let's talk about, you know, the regulatory body NCC. That's Nigeria's regulatory body. You know, it's been involved in awarding licenses, you know, like the InfraCo license to companies like Main One and the rest. But how effective has the NCC been in its regulatory role, first of all?
So regulation-wise, every country has to see what works for them. But when it comes to regulation, I think you not only have to look at the bigger companies, but look at the smaller startups. How can you make their buy-in, their entry into their space easy and break down hurdles? One of the ways I think is looking for startup companies and partnering them with those bigger companies, like a mentor protege program, where smaller companies, startup who are just in their first or 2 years incubative stage, work with a bigger company and say, okay, give us something, you know, give us a roadmap. And that will involve creating policies that forces bigger institutions that we're giving you this license, we're doing this for you. You have to partner with smaller companies. We can do a seed round. You have to give funding, or we can go through a process where we bring a few companies to speak, and then you pick the one you feel comfortable with working with. You know, that has to come from a policy standpoint by, if we give you this license, this is what you may have to give back in return in the next 5 or 10 years or something of that nature. So that is the one way I think on the policy side NCC can try to do. And then not only from that standpoint, but also have trainings, ongoing training of maybe quarterly or however frequently they think they want to. And
trainings for who?
Trainings for everyone, those in the education space, startup companies, and even the big organizations. It can be tailored based on the level that you're in. And part of that training will be, we're going digital. Here's what we plan to do by 2030. We need you at this stage to be at this level by 2030. And every quarterly or every 3 months or so.
Just to keep everyone on the same page.
On the same page, yeah.
Okay. Now, while larger infrastructural projects are quite vital, you did talk about, you know, startup and all that. There's the issue of last mile connectivity, right? It remains very, very critical. How can Nigeria address, you know, the challenges of providing reliable internet access to undeserved or underserved rural areas or even peri-urban areas?
So that have always been a challenge in almost every country. One of the ways to combat that is because the cost to run fiber and put up more towers in those areas are quite heavy, and the return on investment, it's not there. What companies have deferred to is either they use satellite to provide to those areas, or again, the government comes in and subsidize in those areas so you can reach underserved areas. But again, it's always a challenging point,
of course,
because there is the return on investment. And at the end of the day,
and most of the rural, those living in rural areas might not be able to, you know, be at par with how to use the services as well.
That's where training comes in from the NCC to train, have training in those areas to kind of show them this service you're receiving, here's what it can do for you. Again, you don't want to leave them out of the picture because you don't know where your talent is going to come from. You don't know where idea is going to be drawn from the country. So you want to make sure you give everyone across the nation opportunity to have internet access and be able to serve the world.
Right. Now, with the increase in data centers like the MDX. I don't know why you're smiling, but I sound like a technological guru.
Okay, yeah, see, yeah.
Okay, and there's actually greater reliance also on cloud services, at the moment. Now, are there steps being taken to ensure data security and also privacy for Nigerian consumers and businesses? Because it's actually a problem right now in South Africa and also in Kenya.
So when it comes to security, security is always going to be a challenge across the world. One of the ways to, no company, no individual is unhackable. But what can you do? You have to go through some security steps to limit being hacked or your system being compromised. One of the ways is having a frequent password change. Some companies have a policy, every 3 months you have to change your password. And you cannot use the 5 previous passwords. Other ways to do is two-factor authenticator. Every time you log in with a username and password, it sends you an email with a token to log in that code. Or you have
authenticator
apps or something. So by going through that, if someone has your password and code, your username and password, they still need that code that change every 30 seconds. So that is the one way to reduce that. And then also giving better hygiene online practice, right? Not clicking on links you're not sure from, making sure you read the email properly to know if it's the right source, if you're unsure, making calls to your IT team or someone.
Terms and agreements as well.
Exactly. And then every now and then you want to check your email to see what companies have access to your backend data. And when the companies hack, you're supposed to send an email out that way to let you know, hey, change your password, change your username or something, so you don't get compromised in the long run.
Okay, but right now in Nigeria, are there, existing data protection laws, and are they, okay, yes, there are, but then are they adequate for, the growing digital economy?
No, they're not. Again, this is where you need those who are in the cybersecurity sector to really look at those policies and have a game plan. What do I mean by a game plan? There's what is called pen testers. These are hackers that go into organizations and test their infrastructure for vulnerability to make sure how easily are they hackable. And you need the government agencies to actually have a stronger policy that tests on a frequent basis. There are different ways, different licenses you might have to get. These are ways that will ensure that every so frequently you are making sure that you're not being hacked or you are minimizing your threat. So it's a huge undertaking. It involves a lot of money, a lot of manpower, but it is doable.
Okay. Now, we know that, Nigeria's efforts to diversify away from oil, depends heavily on ICT development, right? How is ICT becoming a significant driver of economic growth, especially in sectors or areas like e-commerce, fintech, and education?
So it's becoming a driver because we're in this digital age, what technology has done in every industry is it has allowed you to have data, have some analytics, and make informed decisions. Let's go to the agriculture sector. In some areas, people have to manually plant and water throughout the year. But now you have technology device that can tell you when to water, when the soil is fertile to make sure you know when to plant, and then when you expect to cultivate. So this have allowed you to track. There are even some areas that have special cameras that can tell you when your plants are going to be ripe, your fruits. So what this does is it tells you exactly when to deploy manpower, when to use less water, when to use more water. So just look alone in that sector. There are even some technologies right now that can even plant your seeds for you, right? And even when it's time to pluck and harvest, right? So that is just one area. Think of the fintech sector, for example. Now, I remember I was out of the country and I wanted to order pizza for my kids and my wife, and I was able to do that right from where I was, right? I'm flying out to Abuja tomorrow, and I was able to book my ticket at the convenience of where I was. I don't have to go through any agents, any third party, minimizing me being scammed. So that is what technology offers in those different sectors. We could go on and on and on, but there's so many case studies of the advantage of those things.
It makes life easier.
It makes it easy and convenient.
All right, so now we've talked about what role the government can play, what role private organizations can actually play, but what role can Nigeria play when it comes to leading the digital revolution in sub-Saharan Africa?
You know, before I came here, I was thinking, what role can we play? I think we have to look and see what do we have and where do we want to go. One of the roles we can play, I always say, is start early. We need more training. We need more physical data infrastructure. We need access to technology devices. When it comes to the educational sector, we need to train these kids as early as possible. Give them access to technology, have more workshop with hands-on. This way, it sinks in their head, it becomes a day-to-day life, and then they can start thinking. And then give them use case study, right, of how these things look in the future. Like I just gave an example, you know, you can do a case study of here's where we were back in the days and here's where we are with technology. That can spark someone's mind to start looking and saying, how can I use technology in agriculture, in art, in music, creativity and all of those things. So that's one of the ways I think we can start. And then for we who are more mature, who think we're way behind, no one is unteachable, right? You have to just start somewhere, just start learning. One of the easiest ways to look at your passion, your career, your business, and see how technology has been infused in those areas, and start learning to see who can I partner with that can take my business, take my career, take my passion to the next level, and start playing with those things as soon as possible, as early as you can.
Okay. Now, just before we let you go, we've often heard, you know, that technology will replace jobs. We're still hearing it, you know. But do you think that there's a possibility that in Nigeria, you know, growth of the ICT sector, you know, especially, you know, with investment in broadband and data centers, would actually create more jobs than it displaces?
Yes. So technology is our friend. There are areas where, yes, some jobs will be eliminated, but new jobs are going to spring forth. So I think what people need to look at is not worry about if it's going to take my job, but think of how that's going to help me be more efficient at work. Let's look at the healthcare sector, for example. Think of when you run diagnosis, when you run a few other tests, a few other things. What technology can do is quickly analyze those data and give a quick information about the health of diagnosis of that person and real diagnosis. What that does is it allows the doctor and nurses to focus on more things. So yes, some jobs are going to be lost, but more will be created. Change is ever constant. So what people need to do is see how can I align with this new change and make sure it benefits me more than hurt me. And one of those areas is to always make sure you're being trained, you're beefing up your skills, and knowing what the future looks like to make sure you're trained for the future. So when you get there, you realize that you're going to be displaced out of your job.
Okay. Now let's have your final words just before we let you go.
So we are in a fourth industrial revolution. We're not going back. The world has changed. Some of you may not have known, but some have seen. What you want to do is look at where the future is going and make sure you have the skills needed to make sure when you get there, you are equipped to secure your business, secure your job, secure your career, your passion. You don't want to get left behind. This is coming fast than anyone thinks. Don't look at the point of replacing your job. Look at the point of using that to enhance your job, your career, your business, and your day-to-day activity.
All right, well, quite an interesting and enlightening conversation. Thank you so much, Otis, for, you know, taking time to speak to us on this.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right, so that was Otis Umude. He is the CEO, iFirm International, and creator of GoSpeed Hub. And with that, we'll take a break. When we come back, the show continues. Stay with us.